somewhere and you're like, why am I here?
Yeah, it kind of what I figured out is I can focus for 50 seconds out of a minute.
Yeah.
But then there's 10 seconds where I don't even know what I think about,
Yeah.
And so in certain things that works great, but then like working the line where you're working with hot food, sometimes not the best.
Yeah.
And so my whole goal when I was at the French Laundry was to be a calm cook.
Yeah.
To figure out how to handle anything and be as calm as possible. And so while I was at the French Laundry, I actually started studying Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
And so every Thursday I would go to this temple and I would stay the night there and I'd learn how to meditate. And it's the same temple that Steve Jobs used to go to.
That's in SF?
It's in just outside in Marin.
In Marin. Okay. What's it called?
Green Gulch.
Green Gulch. Got you.
And so I read Steve Jobs' biography, and in that he talks about a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that was written by a Zen monk called Shunryu Suzuki. And Shunryu Suzuki started the San Francisco Zen Center.
Okay.
And so Steve Jobs said that this book changed his life. And I said, if there's a book that changed Steve Jobs' life, then I should probably read this.
That book, yeah.
And so I read it, and I went down, and I went to this temple, and I ended up meeting one lady named Emma Heller, who was, after the Dharma talk, she was selling bread, and I was asking about the bread, and I told her I worked with French Laundry. She actually was in charge of the garden. And she's actually, there's an article about her where it's the top 10 women in Buddhism to know of all time. Like, since the start of Buddhism, and she's on that list. And then she ended up being my Zen teacher.
Whoa. So Zen teacher, what does that entail?
So there's a formal process where you take the Zen vows, and that's kind of a formal process. And while you take the vows, you sew a rakusu.
Yeah.
Right? And the rakusu is this little, it's the start of a robe.
Okay.
And so all monks that you see, the robes that they're in entail what level of Buddhism they're at.
Okay.
Right? And they sew those. And so as they're training for that next level, they're literally sewing their robes.
Okay.
And sowing the knowledge and the seeds of what they're trying to learn.
Okay.
And so that's the formal practice. And then kind of the practice that I went through and am still going through was I would go down to this temple on Wednesday, and I would stay the night. I would help them clean dishes. I would stay the night. I'd wake up in the morning. I would meditate, and then I'd go down to the garden, and I'd work with this lady, Emila. And she just encouraged me to study the mind, like study how your mind works.
Yeah.
And where I think, honestly, I made a breakthrough was being able to look at how I talk to myself. And if I can say that there's ever been anything in my life, it was understanding truly how you talk to yourself. And so, like, even as we're doing this podcast and I am talking to you, you are talking to yourself twice as fast as I'm talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
And so everything you go throughout in life, you are talking to yourself. And how that voice talks to yourself will dictate a lot of how you feel about yourself.
For sure.
And what I learned was I never spoke poorly to myself, but I would mimic the voices of the people that I thought would be angry with me.
Okay.
So literally I would have Tyler's voice in my head. I would have Chef David's voice in my head. And when I learned that about myself and I changed that voice from them roasting me about something to my voice saying, hey, Jason, it's okay. We will figure this out.
That's fine. Yeah.
Then the last year I was at the laundry was, honestly the most proud I've ever been of myself as a chef.
Yeah.
And it felt like I could go into service every day and, knock it out of the park no matter what.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's self-growth like a motherfucker.
It took a long time. It took a long time to get there, you know?
Yeah.
And the more things that you have in your life where shit happened to you that you can't explain why it happened, you know? A lot of kids come from broken homes, you know?
Yeah.
And when you come from a broken home and things happen and you really can't explain it, the more erratic that voice will get, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I make it a point to stay right in the middle. You know, I'm going to be nice to myself, but I'm also going to be, you know, hold myself to a certain standard. So every morning I wake up, I look myself in the mirror and I go, you're fucking amazing. You're a champion. Now shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? It's like humble yourself a little bit before you walk out that door. And that always kind of helps me, you know, get into the mindset of having to be this, you know, leader to my cooks and having to make decisions that affect what people are ultimately putting into their bodies, you know, which is food. So that's something that you learn, you know, after you're done being the erratic cook, that was crazy the way you put it. But it's like, yeah, you go from that being crazy and kind of like, you know, not really thinking in a focused manner to going home and being like, I need to like think about this on another level than just like when I get to work, you know? And once you start doing that, you start growing internally. And I'm super interested in that because you've told me about the Zen Garden before. And
we'll go down there.
Yeah, hell yeah, let's go. Hell yeah. Can anybody go?
It's open to the public.
Okay.
It's a little weird now, but
yeah, I know. Yeah.
They literally have probably like $50 million worth of land that was given to them by the guy that started Kodak. And the only rule was that you have to operate a farm here.
Okay.
And then forever. And then it has to remain open to the public. Okay. And so you can go. They have a Sunday public program.
Yeah.
And then they have it's a very special place because it's one of the only places in the U.S. where it's in kind of a monastery-like setting, and then people live there full time.
Yeah.
A lot of the temples are kind of like part-time throughout the U.S., but people live there full time, so you get the feeling of what it's like to meet more than just one person that spent the past 30, 40, 50 years studying their mind.
Yeah. Now, when you say study their mind, there's processes to this, no? Like if you say you have a teacher, there's ways, right? They're telling you the ways to do it, or is it kind of like figure it out with these hints that I give you? Like what is the teaching like?
You know, in Zen, there's all sorts of different teaching.
Okay.
And ultimately, it comes down, and I am not a Zen teacher.
Okay.
Myself, you know, but there's a Zen practice where when you start, they give you a riddle.
Yeah.
And and this is literally a riddle you'll deal with for 10, 15 years. And the whole goal is to figure out the solution to the riddle, and you have to keep coming back to your master with an answer. Right? Or keep coming back to the top monk with an answer. And so from what I've heard, you eventually keep going back, and the Zen teacher just tells you no until you completely break down. And then after you completely break down, then they'll tell you yes. And so that's one way. And I'm probably butchering a lot of the terms with this. And so the other way, and Zen means to sit. And so Zen Buddhism is a Japanese sect of Buddhism. And it's focused on sitting meditation. And so in our culture today, you hear a lot about meditation, but honestly, when you spend time at the temple, nobody talks about meditation. They talk about sitting.
Yeah.
And then I've literally never heard anyone at that temple talk about enlightenment. They just talk about taking the time to study your own mind. And, you know, honestly, the RZA put it the best way that I can explain it. And it's like, you go and sit with yourself for 3 days, and you will start to hear your voice. And the next best way I could explain it is that you you can't have a relationship. Your relationship with the outside world will only be as great as your relationship is with yourself. And so Zen is kind of a study of first understanding that everyone in this world is suffering. The moment you die, the moment you're born, you start dying. Mm-hmm. You're living your entire life to die at one point. And so Zen is a study of life. And so it's a way, and I think it gets kind of bastardized, and I'm probably bastardizing right now, but I think it's very difficult. I think it honestly creates complications for people when they try to study Zen while also living a busy life.
Yeah.
You know, you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I should have meditated for 20 minutes. And then there's actually studies done of like meditation apps and things like that are maybe like 2% as effective as like true meditation.
Yeah. Sitting down with yourself and just, that's it.
For example, when you sit in the Zendo, you don't close your eyes.
Okay.
You face the wall and your eyes are at the floor, and the whole thing is maintaining a certain posture. And as you're sitting there, you're just focusing, okay, my back hurts a little bit, or you break the posture, and then you just bring the discipline back. Yeah. And every time you bring the discipline back, right, like you sit with your hands like this, and if you slouch a little, right, in some temples, there's actually someone in the Zendo that goes and hits your back with a stick, and it brings you back. And so you're always coming back to the moment. So your mind's over here, right, and you notice something's wrong, you come back to the moment. And so it's kind of just a practice of living in the now.
Whoa. Well, we just went down a huge rabbit hole from the French Laundry, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We're getting to know Jason. But let's go back to the restaurant. So you're about to come to the end of your time, no?
Yeah, so, I had been there about 4 years, and I kind of had a decision to make. Either I stay at the restaurant, I really wanted to work the meat station, and then potentially move on to being a sous chef at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at what other potential options there could be, and at this time, I'm broke.
Yeah.
And I find this random ad on Craigslist, and it was for a job in Wyoming for like 2 months, and it was going to pay more money than I had ever had in my bank account, and it was looking for a chef and a chef's assistant. And at this time, I had started dating who is now my wife, Sarah.
Shout out to Sarah, because she made this delicious banana bread here, and I haven't offered you any, but I am literally going to eat this whole thing.
Yeah, she did awesome with that. And so it's me and Sarah, and find this ad, responded to the ad, they sent us some pictures, showed Sarah the pictures. She was unbelievably pumped about the thought of us going on an adventure to Wyoming, and then got on a phone call with the guy and learned more about the position. And basically the only question this gentleman asked, his name was Mitch, was, his question was, do you get paid by the French Laundry? I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, does the French Laundry actually pay you money to cook there?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes. He's like, all right, well, then you're hired. And he was just trying to see if I was like just an intern.
Yeah,
or
just a stage. Yeah.
Yeah, or if I actually worked there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yes, they do. He's like, all right, well, listen, this sounds good to me. If it sounds good to you, then I say we do it. And it was like a 15-minute phone call. And I'm like, all right, Mitch, sounds good. Let's do it. And I agreed to take this job, not really having any clue about anything other than I'm going to be making, basically it was $10,000 a person a month. And I was like, well, that's going to put some money in the bank. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I'm making like $12 an hour,
Yeah.
And so I agreed to it. I tell Sarah, she's pumped, but then now I have to leave the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so take a couple of days. Eventually, I put my notice in. I talked to Mitch again, and then